Sometimes, if luck isn't working for you, then it's time to think smart.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another set review of the Mysterious Fortune. Last time we looked at Gold Paladin, and this time we take a look at the new Great Nature cards with their upgraded support for the lottery mechanic, or as the community likes to say, the Gacha mill. But besides the Gacha mill support, we also got some generic support for Great Nature, and most importantly, and one of my favorites, is support for the Hammski right chain, or as it can now be named, the Hammski Archetype. So without further ado, let's jump right into the new cards for Great Nature and the new support and see what this can mean for Great Nature in standard and in some case even for premium. So first off, they of course got reprint triggers, and they got the reprint for their heal and for their draw trigger, but like all the other reprints, it's only 1 star as it's not really anything special. But besides that, because it's the second support wave for Great Nature, we also see their third front trigger, which is Correction Chinchilla, but we also see their third crit trigger, which is Sensor Mill Galago. And both of these are going to get 3 stars from me because it's the third crit and third front, which allows them to play with their trigger lineup and have more deck designing options besides the generic trigger lineup that we had from the first wave. Now with that, we of course get a new starter, but it's just a generic starter, which is Jet Ink Fox, and just like the other ones, it's only 1 star. Then Great Nature also get a brand new vanilla, which is Elderly Professor Markhor Meta, and it's the grade 2 12k vanilla. Usually, I'm typically not really that fond of these 12ks, but it does have some synergy with a more aggressive playstyle, as it together with an 8k makes a 20k column, which can beat over a Force grade 2 if they happen to get defensive trigger. And it also is defensive playstyle if you write this thing on your Vanguard circle, which makes defending and guarding on that turn a bit easier. But overall, I can only give them 2 stars, as that's basically the only use these cards have, especially in Great Nature. Then next up, with the addition of the new crits and fronts, they also get the new grade 1 drop PG, which is Hearty, Academic, and Teat. And just like the other generic drop PGs, I'm only gonna give it 3 stars, as it just opens up more deck building design, especially in combination with the third crit and third front trigger. Now that the basics are out of the way, let's dive into their new VR so we can have a better understanding what this new support is gonna focus around, and we can see the interactions between the new support cards with the new VR. And their new VR is this grade 3 Holy Great Sage of Black Shadows, which you usually typical think that shadows are black, Isabel. Her abilities are, and the first one is the kicker of this card, continues on Vanguard circle. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you perform both of the effects of perform one of the effects. So all the lottery mills or the gacha mill mechanics usually typically only get one of the two. Now, no matter what the mill is, if your opponent's a grade 3, you get them both. So think of Monoculous Tiger, you get both guard restriction. Or with Binoculous Tiger, you get the 5k power to 3 units, you get the draw, and you get to retire something of your opponent for 1 counterblast. That's insane value. So this alone as your Vanguard unit makes those units, and we're going to get a couple of more mill cards, even better. But she herself has also the Gacha mill mechanic, and that's auto Vanguard to Vanguard circle. When placed, costs Soul Blast 1, put the top card of your deck into the drop zone and perform one of the effects below, depending on the card's type. Normal unit, this unit gets power plus 15k until the end of turn. Trigger unit, return the card put from the deck into your drop zone by this effect to your hand. So either you have a solid 27k beater on the rearguard circle or your Vanguard circle, or you get the more shield to hand as you're gonna mill and trigger, and that's typically 15k or a PG to hand, which is nice for defensive value. And if you have the continuous Vanguard skill active, no matter what you milled, you get the card to hand, which then can be a key unit as it can be a normal unit, and you always have a 27k Vanguard or rearguard, which is pretty good. Now that we have understanding what this card can do, let's go see what the rest of the support of this set brings us, and then we come back to this card and have a better understanding what we can rate this card for and how good this engine in this new deck can perform. So first off, we start off with the generic support, and we have this grade 1 Protractor Parrot. And its ability is Auto and Guardian Circle. When placed, if you have 4 or more front row rear guards, draw a card and discard a card from your hand. So yeah, this is not a good card. I'm gonna only give it 1 star. The reason why it's bad, in general decks, this is way too slow, as you need to ride up twice to get those both markers. Also, you need to have a full field, so what's the point of this? Also, that type of restriction for only a cycle, yeah, bad. Next up, we've got a grade 2, which is an interesting one, as it's an 8k grade 2 that is Art Club member Père Noir, and its ability is Act, Drop Zone, cost, bind this unit, and put up to 2 normal units from the drop zone on the bottom of your deck in any order. This is a pretty nice card, which I want to give 3 stars, because yes, it's not the most eventful card, and it won't really pressure your opponent in any shape or form, but it does fix some issues for the clan, which allows this to be a good 1-off or 2-off in the deck, as it works in the drop zone. So no matter what's going to happen in the late stage of the game, it's going to be there at some point, unless it's going to be in damage zone, but that's less likely to happen. So you're going to activate this ability, and it can do 2 things for you. It can combat deck out to some extent, which Great Nature can be going for if you go very aggressive, especially with a lot of Superior Calling, even with Leopold, also the extra amount of milling you're going to do at this point. So if the game is going to go a bit longer than you expected, this thing can come in clutch. But this thing can also reload your deck with certain key units you want to search out or you want to need. And this is mainly useful for things in Premium, because Premium is more about searching cards, especially with the searchable grade 3s. So this card allows you to run more 1-offs or lower amounts of certain utility options, and you can then basically put them back into the deck if you want to search them out again with other cards. So this card has a pretty overall very interesting utility-wise aspect to it. So therefore, it's I think a very solid grade 3, which might not be all that useful right now, but can definitely come in handy later down the road at some point. Then next up, we've got once again one of my favorite cards of this set, just like what you had last time with Gold Paladin. One of the cards that I highlighted during the set breakdown, and that is Culture Gorilla. And this grade 3, non-axle marker grade 3, has the following ability: Auto and Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. At the end of battle, let your Vanguard attack, cost Soul Blast 5. And stand all of your power 25k or greater rearguards. If you stand 2 or more, retire all of your opponent's rearguards. So basically, to summarize what I said in the previous video, yes, Soul Blast 5 is heavy, and most likely won't be useful right now with all the extra Soul Blasting we're gonna do, but it does have some niche utility-wise to it, because it is somewhat a stronger and weaker version of Sword Trooper Equitus from the Nova Raptor set of Infinity Deity Cradle, because it can restand all of your units, and you can do it after your Vanguard attack. So if they didn't get defensive trigger, you can resolve this. And this is a non-targetable restand. And that's mainly useful for Premium, because 1, the power 25k can be easily fulfilled with a strike like Balur that can power up your front row, or basically your field, which makes this card even better. But also this synergizes with Zoa, which means you can restand your Zoa unit, as it's a non-targetable restand. And that combined with units that potentially have a guard restrict, foreshadowing, then this ability would become even better and better and better. But overall, I can only give it 2 stars, even with all that hype to it, because yes, it's still very limited. It's a Soul Blast 5, and in Standard, this most likely won't be useful only in a budget alternative deck, but even then, I think the Hammski budget deck is then miles ahead, especially with the new support. I think it's mostly useful in Premium, as you probably can sustain the 5 Soul Blast a bit better, as you have more resource options available in Premium, and you will get more benefit out of them thanks to things like Stride. So yeah, only 2 stars. Maybe you guys can make this thing work in the deck and make it the newest Great Nature OTK. I mean, I have faith in you guys. You can do it. Show the world the power of the gorilla. Now, with that bold statement out of the way, we go to the following card. That is this grade 1, Dry Cell Rabbit. And its ability is Auto Rearguard Circle once per turn. When a card is put from your deck into the drop zone, if this unit is on an additional Rearguard Circle, cost, discard a card from your hand, and this unit gets power plus 15k until the end of turn. Yeah. 1 star. You might say, well, 15k is a lot of power. That makes it at 22. Everything about this skill makes this card terrible. First off, it's a 7k grade 1, so it's already a bad right target in most situations, unless you want to underswing for some reason, but in standard that's not really the case. But the issue with this card is, it's already behind a restriction that you already need to mill a card, so you're probably already using a counterblast or assault blast for another ability. Then it also needs to be on an additional rearguard circle, so that's yet again another restriction, meaning you cannot put it onto the field in the early game, otherwise it's a dead card. And then you also need to discard. And then, so you basically need to discard for power. Discarding for power is almost never a good thing, unless it's your final turn push or that power justifies the discards. I mean, look at Gear Chronicles Rebellion. They are justifying the discards. This rabbit isn't. Then back to the foreshadowing content, we have this grade 1 solution Tenrik. And its ability is continuous on rearguard circle. During the battle it attacked. If your drop zone has 25 or more cards, and this unit is on an additional rearguard circle, your opponent cannot call grade 0 cards from hand to the Guardian Circle. This has, just like the Dry Cell Rabbit, the condition that needs to be on an additional rearguard circle, which would make it bad because it's late game. However, because of its other condition to the skill, it doesn't really matter that it also needs to be put on an additional rearguard circle because it's a completely late game card. You need to have 25 cards in your drop zone. So having that additional rearguard clause on top of it, you don't really care. Having the guard restrict that your opponent cannot call grade 0s is pretty nice because on an additional rearguard circle, it will hit for a higher number, especially if we can give it power through other meat, which is the foreshadowing aspect that I had with the Cultured Gorilla. Because you can resend this thing. And because it has a guard restrict, which isn't targetable in any sense, in premium, this can be your Zoa unit. Having a Zoa that swings in twice with the nullification of grade 0s, yeah, if they don't have grade 1 PGs or they don't play a Protect Clan, yeah, they're pretty much dead. So overall, I think it's a solid 3-star card. Yes, you have these insane combos, but that's very late game, meaning the card won't really do much in the early game. And even though you have these crazy combos, which is very unlikely, just in the general sense how you can use this card, it's a very beneficial card because in a late game, your opponent probably won't have a lot of guard options more available to them because they've already been guarding a lot of stuff, especially since you're an Exo clan. And if this thing can swing high enough on an Excel marker, maybe an Excel 2, then it becomes a 13k, but you can potentially give it with crits and other powers or triggers and that kind of stuff, make it even a little bit higher, and because they can no longer use triggers to guard against it, it might give you the game right then and there. And I think that's the value of this card because it comes in clutch at such a late game position. I mean, it's basically the OG Silent Tom, and the fact that they put it on such a restrictive thing showcases how powerful such a skill actually is. Then we follow up with the last cards that have the same restriction on that it needs to be on a additional rearguard circle, and that is this grade 2 Temp Clerk Demdil. And Demdil's ability is act on rearguard circle once per turn. If it's on an additional rearguard circle, costs counter +1, and this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. If you have 5 or more front row units, your opponent chooses one of his or her rearguards and retires it. So the condition is somewhat similar to the grade 1 guard ability, where you need to have 4 front row rearguards. This states 5 front row units, but that includes your Vanguard at the point because it states units. So you need to have a full front row. And so basically, for a late game card, which can counter +1, give it an additional 10k, so on an Excel 2, that's a 24k attack, which is a pretty nice number, and it also retires something from your opponent. That's actually not bad. For a certain build that we're going to go over in a second, basically the Hammski build, this is a pretty good grade 2 that they can use because the Hammski engine is all around generating 2 Axel circles on your first grade 3 turn, which basically fulfills this condition completely in one go. So yeah, I think this is an excellent card for that engine, and also for standard grade nature in that sense, for a more controlled playstyle where you go for a more longer, slower pace, where you're guaranteed that you're going to generate that extra Axel circle so you can fulfill this condition. Which incidentally synergizes really well with Leopold, as you can call a couple of units potentially and then you meet the requirement for this card. So overall I think it's a solid 3-star card, as it is a good card once it goes live, but it has the same flaws as the other 2 cards that we just discussed by the fact then it needs to be put onto an additional rearguard circle, meaning your normal circles won't really facilitate this card all that well. Now with those cards away, let's dive into the new Hammski support, because we got 3 new Hammski cards which synergize really well with the Hammski right chain that we got from last year, which makes the whole thing a lot more consistent. And we start off with this grade 1, which is Hammski's classmate, Pastel Marker, Hamma. And Hamma ability is auto Vanguard rearguard circle. When placed, cost soul +1 and put a grade 2 or less card from your hand into the soul and draw a card. So, on placed, cycle. That's basically what it is. Usually it's whatever, a cycle card. We already have some of this, so it typically gives it a 2 or 3 star rating, especially because it's on place. But it solidifies its 3 star rating because you soul +1 and put a card into the soul. That is what makes this card essential for the Hammski right chain, as you want to have the grade 1 and the grade 2 specifically in your soul the moment you go into grade 3. You have the grade 1 that goes into soul and fetch out the grade 2 that you can fix the right chain if you didn't have that. But let's say you had the grade 1, but you couldn't call it to the rearguard circle, and you don't have the grade 2. But the moment that you write up the grade 2, and you then suddenly draw a card, and you then have the grade 2. There's no way that you can then put it into the soul on time. This way, you can put it into the soul. So this card can basically help you in some extent to fix the right chain if you're in an awkward position where you had the grade 1, but not the grade 2, but for some reason get it in hand before you go into your grade 3 turn. Then follow that up, we got another support for the Hammski right chain, and this is also a very generic support, which is Hammski's rival Red and Blue Pencil Hamiko. And I'm sorry for all the great nature players out there, because it's such a good generic support card, you're somewhat forced to run this card. And writing that name on your deck sheet is gonna be a pain in the ass. And the reason why I say that is because of his following abilities. It's his auto and Vanguard the rearguard circle. When placed, cost count +1, soul +1, look at the 2 cards from the top of your deck, put 1 card from among them into your hand, and put a card from among them into the drop zone. So it's somewhat similar to an Oracle Think Tank skill. You check the top 2, you fetch 1 to hand, and the other one goes to the drop zone. It doesn't go top deck, but it goes to the drop zone, which synergizes also with all your mill mechanic cards, as this will still be registered as a card put from the deck into the drop zone. So this is a solid +1 that fuels your deck engine, which is really good. Then it also has a second ability, which is auto and Vanguard the rearguard circle. Once per turn, when your card is put from the deck into the drop zone, you may have this card get power +5k until the end of turn. This is pretty good because it can become a solid 40k beater thanks to its own ability, and it synergizes with the rest of Great Nature, so that's really good. And that already there is a 5-star card right in there. So yeah, rest in peace all your Great Nature players that are going to head out to Team League and other BCSs. But the reason why I also stated that's a Hammski support, because if you look at the skill, you're like, how is this a Hammski support? Because you check top 2 and you draw, and it's a Vanguard to rearguard circle skill. This is the niche situation that I just explained with the grade 1 Hammski, as you write up to grade 2, this thing can be, that can potentially be this thing or another grade 2, and you activate its ability during the turn, and you see the grade 2 that you need to write actually. Then you can use the grade 1 to put it into your soul that way. But this card can also fetch you the grade 3 Hammski that you need for your final right chain piece. Because even if you have the grade 1 and the grade 2 in your soul, it doesn't mean anything if you don't have the grade 3. This will help with that consistency. So yeah, pretty nice. And definitely 5-star worth, because it's a good Archetype support card, and incidentally happened to be one of the best general support cards that came out of this set for Great Nature. But we're not done yet with the Hammski right chain, as we also have this grade 3 support card as Hammski's rival Rocket Pencil Hamdon. And its ability is auto and Vanguard the rearguard circle. Once per turn, when your other unit is placed on an additional rearguard circle, cost count +1 and put a card from your hand into the soul. And that unit and this unit gets power +10k until the end of turn. If you have 2 or more additional rearguard circle, draw a card. So this is great for Hammski's, as it is a solid backup right target that can fix your right chain, but also is the perfect rearguard unit that makes the deck even better the moment that your engine went off. As if you do not have the right chain completely, you maybe missed the grade 1 or grade 2 and you just drawn into those things, This thing can then be your Vanguard. You use the ability, as you already have one Axle marker, call something to it, use the ability, put that missing piece into the soul, get some power onto the board, your Vanguard becomes 22, and the rearguard becomes another 10k, so it also puts that solid pressure, but you're ready for next turn to go into the Hammski and create even more Axle circles and superior call cards from your deck. But in the scenario where you already have the right chain live and active, and you have this thing as an additional unit onto the field, then it becomes a good cycle engine, because you put something into the soul and you draw a card, but also you get more power onto the board. And this is the whole reason why this interacts with the other cards that we just talked about that works on the additional circles, because you're going to generate a lot of additional circles pretty damn fast, and then you can give those units even more power. And this card is then a good target to put onto a non-Axle circle, as it gains a 10k, so it's a 22k on its own, which will hit over defensive trigger. And then suddenly a card like Solution Tendrick with the great 0 guard restrict becomes even better, because with that and this card together, that becomes a 23k unit on an Axle 2. That's a pretty good number. So for that, this card is, in my opinion, definitely a 4-star card, as it makes the whole Hammski right chain all the more worthwhile, and also adds a little bit to the consistency in the case that it goes sour. So yeah, Hammskis are looking actually pretty damn fine, and this is probably going to be a very fun budget deck alternative. So you bet your ass it's going to be featured on the budget deck video for the Mysterious Fortune. Now with the Hammski cards out of the way, we can dive into the new dedicated support for the mill mechanic that either works with cards that are going to get milled, or the actual new cards that can mill stuff. So we start off with this grade 1 support card that is Skill Toucan, and its ability is Auto Rearguard Circle. When placed from hand, cost Soldiers 1 and return one of your other rearguards to your hand. So what's nice about this ability is that the new mill cards are unplaced. So this means you can activate their abilities in the early game, call this card, and then bounce them back and save them for late game if you want to use them again. It doesn't really synergize with the Tiger mills, because those are on boost or on attack, so it doesn't really matter. But this works with the new mill cards that we're going to go over in a second. This also is a nice support with the Hammski engine, in the fact that you're going to probably run those cards that are going to be called on the additional circles to benefit their skills. In the early game, they don't really do that much, but if you want to pressure your opponent a bit more in the early game, you can call them. And with this Toucan, you can bounce them back and then call them to the additional circles, which gives you more value for your buck, which is pretty nice. And also, this synergizes with the Hammski grade 2 that mills cards with its own skill, because its second ability is Auto Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. Once per turn, when your card is put from the deck into the drop zone, you may have this unit get power plus 5k until the end of turn, turning it into a 13k booster or beater, which is a solid number. So overall, I think this is a solid 3-star card, as it helps to get more value out of specific cards, but the cards where you get more value of aren't that impactful, so that's why it's only a 3-star card. But this card can see more potential in the future if we get more powerful unplace abilities. Then the next support card for the mill mechanic is this grade 2 Observation Scribe Snug Wheel. And its ability is Auto Rearguard Circle. Once per turn, when your Vanguard attacks, if your card was put from the deck into the drop zone this turn, cost counter plus 1 and stand this unit. So we have a restander once we mill something for a counterblast. This is pretty nice in general, but not super amazing, because it's not a general restander, because we need to combine it with something that mills. So we're already probably gonna use Soul of Counterblast, so it might not be as useful in every situation, and it can only be paired up with a mill mechanic. So if we don't run mill cards, this card doesn't really do anything. Also, sadly, it only synergizes the moment that your Vanguard attacks, meaning we cannot stack triggers onto it for both attacks. But if it wasn't that, it could have some really insane synergy with the Gorilla that also can restand something once the Vanguard attacks. So yeah, it makes sense that they're both at the same restand condition. But overall, once again, I think it's a solid 3-star card, as it just gives more multi-attack potential, even if you don't have the Axle markers to facilitate those attacks. But it also synergizes in premium, as you now can have a standalone restanding Zoa column. Now we go over the new Milman cards, and we start off with this grade 3 that is Daring Scientist Mara Martin. And Mara Martin's ability is Auto Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost Counter Blast 1 and Soul Blast 1. Put the top card of your deck into the drop zone and perform one of the effects below, depending on the card type. Normal unit, your opponent cannot intercept until the end of turn. Trigger unit, retire all of your opponent's rear guards in the same column as this unit. So either no interceptors or you retire a column. Makes sense that it's divided in this category, as having the one doesn't really negate the value of the other one, because if you're up against protective force and destroying a column, what's the point of then negating the intercept, as they probably only have one intercept. Overall, I'm not really a fan of this card as value wise, and want to only give it like 2 stars. Was it not for premium? And premium basically bumps this card up to 3 stars. As in standard, this card is whatever. You rather off have Leopold as a support card, as this doesn't really do that much for Isabel, as it once again has Soul Blasting on the skill, and Isabel has already a Soul Blast, and another of these cards are gonna have Soul Blast, and we already see with the support card a lot of Soul Blasting, so you cannot sustain that. But in premium, everybody probably already knows this, you can combine it with a G-Guard and effectively have a column denial ribbon. Then we go over to the actual usable mill cards, at least in standard, and we start with this great one that is proper of Black Jet Cecile. And its ability is auto and Vanguard the Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost Soul Blast 1, put the top card of your deck into the drop zone and perform one of the effects below, depending on the card type. Normal unit, Soul Charge 1. And this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. Trigger unit, draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards from your hand. So if you mill a normal card, it basically refunds its cost and it effectively becomes unplaced, gain 5k. It's alright that you have that condition. Also, if you're lucky and you get that mill and you then soul charge a grade 3, you can effectively have a turn 1 Leopold with full power. And in the case that you mill a trigger unit, you get a super cycle going on, and that can be pretty nice, especially if you run certain tech options. Then with this type of ability you can get away with running more 2-offs than 3-offs because you go faster through your deck. And this in combination with Isabel herself, basically unplace, gain power, super cycle. You got your Soul Blast and Soul Charge, which is pretty nice and is actually pretty good, because then you can search out those key specific units that you want to have, especially in those later stages of the game. So overall, pretty solid card, but not really at the same ballpark as the Tiger Mills. So for that, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. As without Isabel, this card probably will never see the light of day. Then next we have a similar situation with a grade 2 support card, and that is Scientist of Black Sheen, Matilda. And Matilda ability is auto Vanguard the Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost counterblast 1. Put the top card of your deck into the drop zone and perform one of the effects below, depending on the card type. Normal unit, until the end of turn, when your opponent would call cards from hand to the Guardian Circle for the battle this unit attacked, he or she must call 2 cards or more at the same time. So normal unit, gain the Battle Dory effect. Trigger unit, this unit gets critical +1 until the end of turn. So either in the early game you have a 9k grade 2 with a crit, or a 9k grade 2 with the Battle Dory effect. And that can of course be boosted. Either effects separately aren't great, and that makes the card somewhat actually pretty The only thing is if you have Isabel's skill live, this can actually become a very solid unit, as you have a Battle Dory unit with a crit. And that on an Axel Circle is 14k, means depending if your opponent has interceptors or not, which you should get rid of, because in this case, you get the most value out of your Battle Dory unit at any time of the game. Because if your opponent is sitting at low damage and you come in with a Battle Dory unit, they're like, fine, I will take the damage because maybe I got defensive trigger and I don't waste 2 cards from hand. But with that additional crit on top of that, then that makes your opponent think twice. And they're probably gonna guard 2 cards for an attack, which they probably could have guarded with 1 card. So you get more value out of this. The only problem is, because it's such a late game effect, to get both effects with Isabel makes the card somewhat inoperable. If you're running a pure Isabel build, it's perfectly fine. But the moment we strive away from Isabel, this card would be thrown out of the deck in a heartbeat. And for that, I only can give it 2 stars, because its early game potential is pretty bad, its future potential is pretty bad, and it's only usable in the late game in combination with Isabel, which is sad. And with that, we went full circle and we're back at Isabel, and then we can see the true potential of this card. As we have, of course, the generic Hammski support that doesn't really apply to this card, but we do have the grade 2 Hammski, which is really good for this deck as a consistency bump. But the fact that we now get potentially both effects off, makes all our male mechanic cards so much better, as it makes Matilda good, it makes Cecile good, it also makes Monoculus and Binoculus Tiger good, and it can be the good first right, and then we can go into Leopold if we want to have close games. Also, she herself on a Vanguard circle is a pretty solid unit, as it can swing in for a high beater. The only problem is with the engine is that the new mill mechanics are in place. Luckily, we have the support grade 1 toucan that can then bounce them back if we want to use them in the early game and then bounce them back to hand, and we can use them late game. But the problem with that is that the toucan, as well as Cecile and Isabelle, uses soul. And that is a problem. Soul is most definitely a issue for this new deck, and that is gonna be the driving factor of how we can manage this deck to go for the long run, as at some point we're gonna run out of soul. Yes, we can create more if we keep rewriting, but at some point that stops. And we do have cards that go into the soul, but most of them are from the Hammski right chain, and they don't plus you on soul because you soul blast and then you put something into soul, which is awkward. We need more soul, and we need more ways to fill out the soul if we want to keep fueling cards like this, and if we want to get more value out of our cards. Thankfully, we have cards like Matilda, and this is also the reason why Matilda is a bit better in the current build, is because it costs a counterblast. And the same with Binoculus Tiger, because those cards cost counterblast, means we have different abilities with different costs, which allows us to distribute our resources over different abilities, which gives us more ammunition for all the mill skills, which also in turn gives us more chances to utilize the toucan with its rebounds ability. All in all, Isabelle herself is an amazing card for Great Nature, especially with the new focus around this mill mechanic, and would definitely get 5 stars, as it's right now one of those cards that generate insane amount of value, and most likely will still be used for months and years to come until we step away from the whole gacha lottery mill mechanic. And with that, we saw a lot of interesting stuff. We saw some generic support, but the main focus of this set was around the new Hammski Archetype support series, as well as some new support for the gacha lottery mill mechanic, and the inclusion of new mill gacha lottery units, including, of course, the main boss monster of the set, the new VR, Great Sage of Black Shadows, Isabelle. And with that, we conclude this set review of Great Nature for the Mysterious Fortune. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of these new cards for Great Nature. Are you agreeing with the ratings that I give? Was I too harsh, or was I too lenient with some cards? Let me know your thoughts and opinions and expectations for these cards in the comments down below, and your experience with playing these cards. Are you curious for more content concerning the Mysterious Fortune? Then stay tuned, as we're diving right into the next set review for the last clan of this set, that is Neo Nectar. And afterwards, we dive into the different deck spotlights for Isabelle, Arbor's Dragon Sephiroth, and of course, Knight of Fury, Agravain. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at Patreon. They make everything on this channel possible. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply head to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!